There's two types of ventriloquists. There's
Good morning, everyone. I think we're just letting some reporters join this press conference. So just give us a few seconds here, and we'll get started.
I think everybody is in the chat, or everyone's in the room. I think we're good.
Okay. So thank you all for being here. My name is Alfredo Romo, and I'm the Executive Director of Neighbors for Environmental Justice. I'm going to take a minute to talk about why we're here, and then introduce the City Council members and environmental justice advocates who we are grateful could join us this morning. Then finish up with time for questions. You can also ask questions in the chat. I know the press release talked about a resolution calling for joint hearings of the Health Committee and the Environment Committee, co-sponsored by Elderwoman Hayden and Elderwoman Rodriguez Sanchez. But there were some last-minute paperwork problems, and the resolution didn't make it onto the City Council agenda yesterday. Fortunately, the Elderwoman chair of those committees, which means that instead of calling for the hearings, they can announce them. So we are here today to support the announcement of environmental hearings this fall. And now I'd like to introduce the chair of the Committee on Health and Human Resources, Elderwoman Rosana Rodriguez Sanchez.
Good morning, everybody. Buenos días, todo el mundo. Voy a estar hablando en inglés primero y luego voy a hablar en español. My name is Rosana Rodriguez. I am the chair of the Committee on Health and Human Relations and the Elderwoman of the 33rd Ward. I am here this morning proudly standing with Neighbors for Environmental Justice. We have been having conversations about the importance of having hearings around cumulative impact, and Alderwoman Haddon, Chairwoman Haddon, who is the chair of the Committee on Environment, is very open to having these hearings. We do not need a resolution in order to have hearings. I think one of the best things right now of having progressives and people who deeply care about movement and community is that our committees want to be a vehicle for communities to be able to have the necessary conversations that we need to have in order to be able to pass policy that is evidence-based. So in order to be able to do that, in order to be able to develop the best environmental policy for the city, we need to be having these conversations. And we're very grateful for all of the groups like Neighbors for Environmental Justice that have been fighting for us to be having these conversations and make sure that the public is informed, that our colleagues are informed of how to best proceed with making policy that is going to benefit our communities and protect our health and the environment. Buenos días, mi nombre es Rosana Rodríguez, yo soy la concejal del Distrito 33 y soy la presidenta del Comité de Salud y Relaciones Humanas en la ciudad de Chicago. Estoy aquí orgullosa de estar con la Organización de Vecinos por Justicia Ambiental. Estamos aquí para anunciar que vamos a estar teniendo audiencias sobre el impacto ambiental acumulativo en distintas comunidades. Sabemos que es bien importante que podamos utilizar nuestros comités de una manera en la que podemos estar discutiendo los asuntos que son más importantes para nuestros barrios. Estamos orgullosos de que tenemos ahora una administración y unos presidentes de comité que están dispuestos a abrir los comités a tener estas discusiones. Tenemos muchas organizaciones ambientales que han estado tratando de tener estas discusiones porque sabemos que para poder pasar política pública que esté basada en evidencia científica, necesitamos poder tener estas conversaciones con gente que son expertos en la materia. Así que estamos anunciando esta mañana que la presidenta del Comité Ambiental, que es María Haddon, y esta servidora, estamos dispuestas a tener estas conversaciones en nuestros comités. Vamos a formar un comité conjunto del Comité de Salud y el Comité del Ambiente. Y vamos a tener estas conversaciones en los próximos meses. No vamos a necesitar tener una resolución tenemos prerrogativas como presidentas de comité y estamos bien contentas y comprometidas a tener estas conversaciones con nuestras comunidades y con los expertos y expertas que pueden hablar sobre el tema. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Elderwoman Rosana Rodriguez, for your support on these efforts. These hearings are urgently needed, and that need is illustrated by 3 Deming reports about Chicago's environmental policies and practices. Number 1 is the letter of findings from the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, which highlights environmental racism in the city's planning and development processes. Number 2 is the report Ineffective by Choice, the Neighbors for Environmental Justice published earlier this year, which analyzed 2 decades of enforcement data and found that current city practices are ineffective at regulating industrial facilities once they have been permitted by the city. Number 3 is the summary report on the botched Hillco demolition issued by the Office of the Inspector General, which is a case study in how these failures of planning and enforcement directly enable serious harm to the Little Village community. Together, these reports show that environmental planning is inadequate, environmental enforcement is ineffective, and vulnerable people are harmed on a daily basis by pollution as a result. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Cheryl Johnson, Executive Director of People for Community Recovery. PCR is one of the groups that filed the federal HUD complaint. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me. And this is an important time that we need to have these hearings to discuss cumulative impact. As you just mentioned with the General Iron situation, that was a classical example of environmental racism in Chicago. It was it's a legacy, as I can say, for the failure of the city of Chicago to regulate and to enforce. It's a legacy and an embarrassment to not only our city and our state in their permitting process. The legacy there is that they never denied operating permits in this city or in the state, knowing that it have a negative impact, knowing there are several violations that occurred at these facilities. So I was happy to learn that the HUD complaint seen through it and forced the city of Chicago to begin dealing with community impact, community engagement. You know, those 2 are so important because we experience these things in our community every day. So when you look at what we're trying to do, we're not just trying to protect our community, we're trying to protect every community. We're trying to protect every family from these poisons that we had to endure for decades. So the enforcement and the regulation, and to be able to talk about the cumulative impact of these harmful things that are doing to our community is the right direction. And I look forward to these mandates, that these timeframes and that been set by HUD that the city must respond to, so we can really dive into and to change what we feel that may be inequity from the city in addressing some of the environmental harms that we had to deal with on a daily basis. So I thank you, Alfredo, for bringing me to this presser.
Thank you so much for your environmental work and also for sharing your lived experiences within your community. Much appreciated. And now I'd like to introduce someone from another EJ group that is part of the HUD complaint and federal compliance agreement, the Executive Director of the Southeast Side Task Force, Environmental Task Force, I'm sorry, Olga Bautista.
Hi, Alfredo. Thank you for moderating today. And thank you everybody for being here. I just want to thank Alderwoman Rosana Rodriguez and Alderwoman Maria Haddon for making sure that these issues are being brought up in City Council. I think there has to be these kind of conversations in our committees, in city council, so that we can have this shared experience of the way that these racist land use laws have been impacting communities of color for far too long. So I completely support this resolution. I want to make sure that we have our plans set forward so that we can pass a cumulative impacts ordinance. And a cumulative impacts ordinance also is just the first of many rules that need to change. So it's not going to do everything all at once, but I think having this commitment to address these issues of racist land use that have continued to segregate the city of Chicago and concentrate dirty industry in Black and brown neighborhoods has to end. And I am here to support those policies. As a member of the cumulative impacts assessment, I have seen the power of the co-governance that is needed in the city of Chicago to be able to make these changes. When you have city officials and impacted communities working together to right wrongs, I think it's key, and it's also a signal of what the new administration's plans are for addressing an array of issues that are impacting our communities across the city of Chicago. So I fully support this resolution, and I'll pass it back to Alfredo. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olga, for your community organizing and also for your fierce environmental advocacy. Thank you so much for being here. We need to understand how these things happen because we need to stop them from ever happening again. The city has committed to this goal, signing a compliance agreement with the HUD and promising that city departments will make changes to better protect environmental justice communities and address the cumulative impacts of pollution. But it's important that we have a public space to talk about all of it, to acknowledge the harm, to understand what changes the departments plan to make, and to ask questions like, are the proposed changes enough? And how we can make sure that these new rules are enforced. Here in the 12th Ward, we have been faced with many heavy industry that continue to implicate the daily lives of community residents that are part of these communities. The Met Asphalt situation, which many of you already know, came into our community back in 2018 without any notification, any community involvement, any benefits to the community, and now we're paying the environmental consequences of those heavy industrial operations in close proximity to our park, schools, and residential homes. And now to close us out today, I'd like to introduce the 12th Ward Elderwoman, Julia Ramirez.
Hola a todos, buenos días. Hi everyone, good morning. Me llamo Julia Ramirez, the Alderwoman of the 12th Ward. I want to start off by saying that as a newly elected, I am solely uplifting all the work that has been done for decades by people all over the city. They have been unheard. They have been shut down, and unfortunately, other electeds have not been collaborative. And I am choosing to change that. I'm choosing to work locally with N4EJ and throughout the whole city to make sure that their voices are heard. Growing up on the southwest side of Chicago, and specifically in Brighton Park, we are built off of industry. They invited immigrants to come, Black and brown people, to work and build up the city. And now we need to protect them long term. We need to make sure that we start considering who we give permits.
I'm sorry, Julia, you went muted.
Am I muted? Am I good?
Try again. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me, Alfredo?
Raise your volume.
Yes, okay. And we make sure that we change that. What we're doing is specifically in the 12th Ward, we want to bring in Neighbors for Environmental Justice, and we want to have further conversations with organizations and residents about who we give permits to and zoning to. And this would be of consideration through all of the city. We have compounded impact on our health,
in various ways, and environmental justice is just as important as any other violence that's committed in our neighborhoods. And I, as an alderwoman, am committed to make sure that we have conversations, that we hold bad actors accountable, and that we have further restrictions for any land use that will further harm our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elderwoman Julia. I just want to sort of open it up to the reporters. If there's any questions that you would like to ask directly to any of the EJ advocates or our elected officials.
Did Alderwoman Rodriguez drop off? I don't see her.
Yes, she dropped off. She had a limited time to participate during the presser.
Okay, gotcha. I'll need to follow up with her later. Thanks.
Thank you, Brett. Also, feel free to follow up with any questions directly to the organizations that are part of this presser, and we'll be more than happy to circle back with, in addressing those questions. So once again, thank you so much for joining this press conference. I would like to give special thanks to our elected officials for supporting these, these efforts, and also to the EJ advocates that have been, part of this work for many, many years. So once again, I'm very appreciative of your support. And once again, thank you so much for joining us today.